Okay, so this last video, horizontal transformations. Note, if I have a transformation of pi over 2 units to the right, and I think about moving my graph to the right, I can also think about moving my axis to the left. So if I think over here, if I was to take this entire graph and move the entire graph to the right, it would look like I'm moving this axis backwards to the left. That's what it would kind of look like doing, right? But a way that I can set that up, is more easily say, hey, I'm used to starting my graph on here, but I could kind of make, right, this fake axis to say, hey, you know what, my cosine function, I've moved it, so now it's going to be a maximum at pi over 2, because pi over 2 minus pi over 2 is 0, and we know that the cosine of 0 is equal to 1. Right? So I can then draw my graph starting from here. Well, what's going to happen? Right? I'm going to go half of my period, right? Which in this case, my period is 2 pi. Right? If I move half of my period, right? I move half of my period, so that's pi over 2, another pi over 2. That's going to put me down at a minimum. Halfway between those, I'm going to be at 0, right? So what I have is that if I took my graph, right? If I took my graph and I moved my graph to the right by pi over 2, I would have a new x-intercept, y-intercept. So over here, I move it, and note that when I move this, this seems to resemble y equals the sine of x. And that's going to be very, very important, that my cosine function and my sine function are just going to be phase shifts away from each other, right? This right here, right, this movement, this horizontal transformation gets called a phase shift, right? So once again, for drawing our pieces, okay, if I'm at 0, I go a quarter of the period minimum, go a quarter of the period 0, go a quarter of the period maximum. Oops, I put that a little bit too high. And if I look at that, here is my graph, right, and I can see that the space that it takes for my graph to repeat itself is still a period equals 2 pi. Okay? Very, very important that we can do that work.